There's a lot to talk about.
Again, very repetitive. 52% of pre-K kids not being prepared, I think, was our biggest surprise. But on the other side of that, we were quite frankly surprised that in lieu of that, the graduation rate was as high as it was. And our biggest concern, again, is technology within the buildings as compared to surrounding districts. Task 2, I guess our issue was lack of parenting and how we get more parents on board at an earlier age so that we could basically make them a part of the process rather than calling home for help sometimes and really not getting where we need to get.
Our biggest surprise was such small amount on technology and books. Our biggest concern was technology funding and kindergarten readiness. On the technology, not spending enough, and computer security, internet access, and concerns with what kids can access.
Again, with our group, it was the readiness of the pre-K students was our biggest surprise, and the biggest concern was with them coming in there, how do we get these kids caught up? Was the biggest concern. And then another one of ours on on area 2 was bullying problems, staying consistent with policies on that, and implementing different programs and so forth for the kids.
Okay, our biggest surprise was just like a lot of people, the 52% of the incoming kindergarten not being prepared. Our concern was the 59% poverty level. And one of our things on task 2 was we were just wondering if maybe we should put more emphasis into preschool.
Our group, the biggest surprise we had too is just the low graduation rate, and then the small number, I mean it's not small, but 60-some% of kids going on to training after high school we thought was fairly low. Biggest concern was just funding and the rumors from our Fed and state as far as funding starting to dry up. Task 2, the early childhood education, we had some questions and issues. My group felt like that there needs to be more information about what is required of a student in kindergarten, what skills do they need to have when they start. Promoting the Parents as Teachers program here locally so more kids tap into that, figure out a way to engage parents into that. And then for the kindergartners that are behind, creating some kindergarten interventions such as tutoring, after school help, so if they are lagging behind, they get caught up early.
Our biggest surprise was the poverty level and what that was looking like. Our biggest concern was the lack of resources that we have that we'd like to improve. And our task 2, I think the biggest concern that we had is just maybe a question of what standards across the country are available that we could maybe look outside of the box on how other cities with our culture, our demographics, and our citizen look like, how are they doing it, and what could we do to learn from them?
Our biggest surprise was that we have a 59% free and reduced lunch that is continuing to increase. Our biggest concern is the 52% of students are entering into our kindergartens and they are not ready for school. What we chose to really focus in on is early childhood education. And we thought about, we were worried about budget cuts for parents as teachers. We feel that's very important. We also think we need to look at offering preschool to all of our students. And we need to look at transportation with preschool because many parents struggle to get kids from preschool to a daycare facility. So maybe partnering up with daycares or somehow getting busing in with that was what we thought about.
Thank you.
Our biggest surprise was the kindergarten readiness, early childhood education, 52% of the kids not being ready for kindergarten. Our biggest concern was the graduation rate and the post-secondary education. Under task number 2, we went with the early childhood education. Why are the kindergarten levels so low, and why are the kids not ready? And how is the district helping the parents get the children prepared for kindergarten prior to kindergarten roundup?
Our group was consistent. We were concerned about the kindergartners not being ready for school and the number of free and reduced lunches. Our biggest concern was classroom size, the student-teacher ratio, and running out of reserves. And under task 2, we said that we were concerned about the student-teacher ratio. What are we going to do when we cut teachers? The length of the days per week, block scheduling or no block scheduling. The elementaries maybe having 1 science teacher per grade level for every class, math teacher, etc. And kids who have enough credits, can they leave early, have early releases at the end of the day, like out of 5th hour or whatever, depending on if you have block scheduling or not. And then maybe the restructure of kindergarten through 3rd grade, 4th through 6th grade levels at what schools.
Our biggest surprise was the percentage of the children not ready for kindergarten. Biggest concern was the funding and the depletion of the reserves. In our task 2, it was the early childhood education. We would like to know how accurate the readiness assessment actually is, if it's state or federal mandated or indicator, if it was district driven, what's the purpose of the readiness assessment, and we'd kind of like to know how many kids are held back in kindergarten from the studies of these resources, and why we can't partner with daycares to help know what skills and et cetera we have to expect for the readiness. Maybe they could work with them in the daycares.
Okay, our group kind of looked at the same issues of the poverty level and the percent of kindergartners readiness, but there's an interesting point made in our group that it's pretty amazing that we get the academic results when you look at the MAP results and graduation rate and so forth based on where we're really starting from. So that was kind of a surprise that ties all those together. Biggest concern is how we're going to fund the future of our district, regardless of whether that's paying teachers or facilities or whatever. And then I guess I'd kind of tie in the organization structure for instruction, quality staff, technology, and facilities all kind of relate to that funding issue, and how are we going to support this, and what are the new models that we may need to look towards to get that done. So.
At our table, our biggest surprise was the attendance rate being 94.2. So that means our kids are here and we ought to applaud our parents for getting them to school. Our biggest concern is funding, and under funding, we worry about that 52% of kindergartners not being ready, and the fact that parents and teachers might be, you know, the funding cuts there. The poverty rate directly affects that funding. Professional development is also affected by that funding because there's not money to do professional development, and our schools are becoming more crowded because of lack of funding. Our number 2 task, we were kind of torn between 2, but I think we were more worried about safe and secure environment. We think that there needs to be more management school resources, and by that we mean spaces and openings when we have kids that need to have those resources. And we'd like to, another issue was stricter policy for discipline when we have a problem with a student. Teacher safety when they encounter students that are explosive or combative in nature, and the fact that maybe teachers aren't trained well enough on how to deal with those type of students.
Our biggest surprise was the percentage of students on free and reduced lunch, and our biggest concern was the lack of adequate funding and federal sanctions. Because as you know, with any sort of money coming from the feds, there are strings attached. There are certain standards you have to meet, and that is a very big concern because that money can be pulled out from under you. The amount of students on free and reduced lunch obviously is showing a huge spike in poverty in our city. But in America, how do you... There is no way to really